I will not give away my secrets. All I can say is if there's a little bit of sounds of like jumping through hoops with flames attached, I'm not going to explain it. Just buckle in for this show. We've got an amazing show coming up with Mike Lindell, telling his story, his support for the Trump campaign and re-election of Donald J. Trump. And then will Mike save Minnesota? But all right, Ken, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing very, very well. I think all the fiery hoops are all put out now, and I think we're going to have a great show. Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun.
Well, I want to explain that there's some similarities. I have been reaching out to Mike Lindell better part of 5, almost 6 years, and it was to tell my story. And I'm not going to go into a lot of depth about it, but I'm going to share a little bit because it's relevant to where we're at in this country right now. And Mike is going to share his very personal story. He has just an absolutely amazing, God-given, entrepreneurial, patriotic, and he's so down to earth and just an amazing.
Well, that was fun. Blog Talk can be interesting sometimes, folks. And while the Mike Lindell interview is interesting, and don't tell anybody, but we have Mike coming on again here, probably inside the next 6 weeks or so. Like a few other interesting things we have going on here, we are working on some changes. There are a few places where we're going to add more wonderful personality to the show. The technical end of the show is the part that I'm in charge of. By the way, I'm Christian, the producer. And if any of you want to do a podcast, you really got to get a hold of me. We can talk about it. It's not easy. Bella can tell you that it's not easy. But there are ways to do this so that you can have a good time. We can have fun. Here's a little sneak peek of some audio that we're going to listen to and talk about, well, maybe next week, but soon.
Worries this morning of a potential domestic travel ban. Reports the Biden administration is considering restrictions between states due to the new outbreaks of the highly contagious
Wonderful blog
new
talk.
strains
Thank you
of
very much.
COVID-19. Joining me right now is the governor of the state many people have been flocking to, Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida. Governor, it's great to have you this morning. Thanks very much for being here.
Good morning.
Florida has been the #1 destination currently searched on the Travel Zoo website. What would a travel ban domestically mean for Florida?
Well, one, it would be unconstitutional. It would be a political attack against Florida. If you look, Maria, right now, you hear this debate over schools. Florida schools have been open the whole school year. We have every parent in Florida has the right to send their child to in-person instruction. Every worker has a right to work and earn a living and put food on their table, and every business has a right to operate. And consequently, our state is doing very well compared to these other states in terms of education and economy. But we also have 26 other states in the District of Columbia that have higher per capita COVID mortality than we do. We have 28 states that have higher per capita cases than we do for the bulk of the pandemic. And if you look right now, states that are always held up by people in Biden's administration, like New York, have way higher per capita patients hospitalized for COVID.
So we're going to come
there's
back
no
to this.
basis in medical, there's no basis in economics, there's no basis in reality to do this except to punish a state that is doing it better than what his experts have recommended. Biden is a lockdowner. His advisors are lockdowners. Lockdowns don't work. We've demonstrated that. We're not turning back, Maria, and they will not be able to get away with targeting Florida.
Florida has been open for several months, and you have prioritized seniors. You have prioritized ensuring that kids are in school. Assess the situation in Florida over the last.
So we're going to get back to that. Now, if I can make it work, which, you know, is questionable because things are what they are. There was a time recently where Minnesota Senator Jensen came in and told us about COVID numbers. And what I wanted to replay for you tonight was that interview, because COVID numbers are real data. Well, I guess they're not always real data. Sometimes they're real data. Sometimes they're not. We trust Senator Jensen because he's a honorable doctor and not a person who's got an agenda. He's actually looking for the truth. So what I'm going to try to do is play that episode for you right now. See how it goes and go from there. Hopefully this works.
Yes. I think we all need to start laughing at ourselves. I don't know. I mean, if it keeps up, Melissa.
Well, we have to laugh at something, so laughing at ourselves is just as good as anything else, I guess.
I've got some Christmas music sent over by Jeremy Munson. I'm going to play here in a second. But we've got Senator Scott Jensen coming on. We're going to talk about the COVID numbers. We've got Larvita. Melissa, how do I say your last name?
I think it's Mafarquhar.
Okay, better you than me, because I could have slaughtered that one. So,
Larvita, if I butchered that, I'm sorry.
She's coming on to talk about how to beat Timmy, the tyrant, the putz, the commie, the communist. Minnesota's kind of beating his ass with these strong women here and defying his orders to shut down. But before we get into all the madness, I was totally thrown off. I think I have to go to like onboarding class for using the Pepsi dispensers. I don't know. I was caught off guard. Threw me off my game. Didn't even know how to respond. You were there with me on the phone.
Yeah, well, when you haven't done something for 8 months, you kind of have to, it's not just like getting right back on a bicycle, and everybody always says that or uses that analogy, but it's really not that simple. Like all of a sudden you get to go to the pop machine and you forget how it works.
Well, I was running, it just amazes me that we go to, our only viable option now for dining is, going through the drive-thru at McDonald's or Wendy's and sitting on the back of the pickup truck. And so, the line is 2 miles long for Wendy's, and I can't go without my Diet Coke. And so I go running in there, and the kid hands me this empty cup, and I'm just like stunted. So what do you mean an empty cup? What the hell do I do with this thing? I mean, I'm out of practice. And then I'm like, you mean the gods of Diet Coke have allowed me now to actually handle an empty cup and actually go to the dispenser, and I'm allowed. I guess now we've irradiated COVID from the Diet Coke dispensing machine. The gods have allowed us to touch the Diet Coke dispensing machine. So
you didn't breathe on it, did you?
News breaking. I am allowed back at the Diet Coke dispensing machine, and then only to get out into my pickup truck safely. I made it in and out without COVID grabbing me, stabbing me, tackling me, sucker punching me, nothing. I made it. And then I made it into my pickup truck, and then I'm putting the lid on, and it's like, oh no, it's a COVID lid. What am I going to do? So I quickly assessed the situation. Did I not, Melissa? I was on my game there, right? And so I grabbed the COVID. I grabbed the COVID infested lid, and I jump out of my pickup truck. And now, you see, he's skilled at this one, the kid at the front counter, because he assessed my situation the minute he saw me coming around the corner. He's like,
COVID cover, I got you covered, right? I got hanging in my hand and without words exchanged. Like, so obviously we were very well skilled and drilled into our minds this COVID situation and all situations. So I, happily sprint in without a word exchange. I hand him the COVID lid. He hands me the COVID-free lid, and I leave, and it's all good. And I'm back to my Diet Coke happy world. But I got to mention something because there's a lot to be said about what are we going to do when we are allowed to live our lives normally. I was giggling earlier today because actually I did a show where I mocked a company man. And so I was up at a drilling rig one day, and I'd walked in, and my buddy was there, and he said, he's like, I have been on this rig. I think it was normally they do 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, and we got a caller joining us. I'm going to pick you up here in a second. I think I know that number. That might be Jay joining us. Hang on a second, Jay. I got to get this story out. So I walk in this rig, and, the company man's normally on for 2 days, 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off, but he's been there for a record of like 90 days or something, had never even left the location. And he literally said to me that he thought he was going to have to learn how to drive again. And I don't know if you've never been up to a drilling rig, picture a drilling rig. It sits on a pad, which is called a location, with all scoria rock on it, with all the trailers. And so my co-host obviously didn't really do any research, even though he'd been on the show with me for many, many years. And I was explaining that I was going to give driving instructions. I was going to help this company man learn how to drive again. So Melissa, of course, you know me, you're getting to know me. And just to add to some theater and to some, optical visions of these, listeners, I told him that I was going to make sure that the company man really honed his skills. And since he's good at multitasking, I was going to try and distract him a little bit. So I just offered up, I decided to straddle him so I was facing him just to give him a few And then I was talking about
this sounds like something you'd hear about at Sturgis on a motorcycle.
Sure. I'll go to Sturgis. I'll hop on somebody's motorcycle and straddle them and teach them how to drive a motorcycle while distracted. I have so many hidden talents. It's just like, that's why, so when we are finally, so I want to finish my story before I get, so my co-host is actually listening, obviously, and he's trying to figure out, he's like trying to say, well, hope you're not going to get in an accident. Is the sheriff going to pull you over? And I'm like, we're on location at a drilling rig. Like, you're not even on a road, but it was probably one of the more highest listened to shows. And if I'm remembering right, I think the name of it was like Nudist Colony Carrot Boy something. It pertained a lot to politics. I can tell you that much. At least in the beginning, no. But that was the true essence of the old shows, was being allowed to get away with some really hilarious skits, and then eventually getting into politics. And I wish I could get away with a little bit more in Minnesota. I think they're still learning how to get to know me, but we will eventually have Scott Jensen joining us in Larvita. Jay, what is new in Jay's world tonight?
Well, it hasn't been a very exciting day. I talked to a few interesting people, some sheriffs and some county commissioners, and some of the restaurants that are still opening in defiance of Keith Ellison.
And here I thought you were going to say...
It kind of sounds like he's stretched.
Oh, I was going to say, I thought you were going to jump in and say, Bella, I'm vehicle impaired. Can you come over here and help me out? Jump in.
Oh, that's funny.
I know. So who did you talk to today? Tell us.
all the people they've got in court and all the papers they've got circulating. They're running out of bodies to hassle more people. So, you know, I don't know if that means they're on the ropes, but they're very, very, very not happy.
Well, good.
I guess
good. We don't want them happy.
We haven't fallen in line fast enough, so I guess they're not satisfied.
Oh, dang it.
Well, I heard that Waltz was interviewed on KARE 11 this morning and was asked about lifting restrictions in January, and that fat-ass Putt said something about he's going to have to look at the numbers in January. January 10th.
They've moved the goalposts yet again. If you were listening yesterday, somebody asked Jan Malcolm, since it's pretty obvious that you said that the data would show that restaurants and bars were just utter vector super spreaders, and it really hasn't played out that way. Do you think maybe we could open them? And she moved the goalposts yet again. So instead of stopping an imminent threat, she moved to, well, we're worried what might happen if they open. Oh,
I mean,
you wish you could make this stuff up.
Oh, you can't even make this stuff up anymore, Jay. You can't even make it up. I mean,
no,
today,
it's pretty sad.
I mean, today I think it was actually Action for Liberty page. I think posted a picture of the Mall of America, with people literally sitting on the floor eating out of styrofoam containers, and I'm like, you can't even make this up anymore. Like, you can't even make this stuff up anymore. It's so ridiculous.
Oh, no, you'll get to talk to Larvita, but one of our previous conversations, the state said, well, the casinos can be open because we really can't do anything on the Indian reservation. So, well, guess who holds their liquor licenses and can stop the liquor trucks from driving onto the reservation? Or who could stop the institutional food trucks from driving out there? They're just choosing to punish a certain group of people. And the very strangest thing is, I don't know if it's intentional. Maybe Keith Ellison has a bad history or narrative going with himself, but it seems like single women are getting picked on especially brutally in this case, with the hardest fines and fees and citations and subpoenas and lawsuits. So, no, that's all kind of interesting. Just before Christmas, it's single out half a dozen to a dozen single women running businesses for jail time and big fines. So, I guess maybe they don't care about the optics anymore as long as they get compliance.
I find it interesting that in May, Jay, I don't know if you know this, but I own a boutique, and I opened 2 weeks prior to the lifting of restrictions. And I refused to back down. I didn't back down. But along with me were a few other women-owned businesses that opened. And so it's interesting to me that the baddest, assest men in this state of Minnesota are women.
Yeah, I've said if you go to rocksandcows.org, where I posted a few articles, I say if you want a free Minnesota, it's starting to look like you're going to have to fight like a girl to get the job done.
Hey, Jeremy Munson posted earlier, and I'm going to read some numbers. This is new cases per 100,000 by state, and it's showing a decrease of 78,000 per 100,000 in Minnesota. Decrease in North Dakota of 144.2 per 100,000. Decrease South Dakota 105.2. Iowa 97. So the numbers are actually going down.
Oh, yeah.
It's interesting because
we'll get our
don't have restrictions.
I think we'll get to hear firsthand from Dr. Jensen when you overlay all the adjoining states with ours that the trend up, the peak, and the trend down all came about the same time for our neighboring 5 states, no matter what restrictions we're on. So, God, you'd almost think that we are dealing with an invisible virus or something. Oh, God.
You mean a virus you don't know you have unless you actually get tested for it?
Yeah, why do they never shut anything down during a bad flu season? Well, because there's really not a whole lot you can do other than being sanitary, separating people like my mother-in-law and Bella's mother away from those people that might infect them. But as far as the general public, there's not a whole lot you can really do. Just keep your distance, wash your hands, and try not to breathe on the poor slob right next to you. Other than that, I really don't think there's a whole lot anybody could do.
Well,
I wish there was. Maybe Dr. Jensen can tell us.
there's a few things I've amped up now. So I was standing in line the other day because, of course, I don't wear my mask. And this obvious tree-hugging greenie, scared out of her mind, was standing there already jumping around, like, you know, scared to be in her own skin and out of her little Yugo and in Whole Foods. So I purposely took a step within her 6 feet zone, and she nervously jumped the other way. And so then I was staring at her, like, hoping that she would just, you know, like, absolutely implode, like, right there on the spot, just poof. She just can't take it. So then she sneers at me, and she's like, you really need, because I wear my mask under my chin, just so, like, it's like, you know, it's there, but defiant. So then she said, you really need to put the mask over your nose. And I just stepped another 2 feet her direction and just gave her the FU. I mean,
I'm not sure. Maybe she should have quoted us. Which medical journal says one layer of tablecloth is the difference between life and death?
I'm telling you, you know, and then I'm still grabbing these social distancing stickers from the floor. I'm still slapping the Karen sticker on the back of these. I mean, I was Karenized, I think, 5 times in the last day, and I'm no longer polite about it. I'm just becoming a little bit more militant about it because it all needs to end. And by the way, has anybody noticed McDonald's now has deemed that if more than one person is in the restroom at any given time, there is a massive COVID outbreak. If more than one person is in the public announcement. When did that start? When did that crap start?
It is very strange. I was wondering, do all the drive-in places, are they going to get their grant money check in the mail despite business having doubled because everyone else is closing down? Do they get a grant money check in the mail from the state because they have indoor dining?
They did the first time.
We'll have to ask Dr. Jensen.
You know, I was at Panera the other day, and I was asking how their business was surviving. And he said that actually their business has been doubling because of all the catering that they were doing. However, any of the Paneras that don't have a drive-through, they were suffering, but the drive-through ones, you know, and I think McDonald's, I don't know that McDonald's will ever go back to normal, even if they do open it up, because I think that all of these restaurants with drive-thrus are running so much more efficiently and less head count. It's just a sad, and I ask myself, and I don't know where Scott is. I'm watching the switchboard, but you know what the hell is this state even going to look like in another year after all these small businesses are gone?
It is very
well,
strange.
And where's funding going to come from? Go ahead, Jay.
I don't know. I mean, I wish I knew. I mean, Mayo Clinic and Fairview Hospitals are closing clinics, community clinics. They closed Bethesda Hospital after supposedly opening it for a COVID hospital, and it gets shut down after the governor says we're shutting down to make more COVID hospital beds available. I heard St. Joe's Hospital, Fairview is going to close that over by the State Fair. I've been told that the Mayo Clinic and maybe even Sanford Health are closing down neighborhood clinics throughout the state and sending, you know, people farther distances. And they say it's COVID. I know lots of pharmacies have closed. They've asked people to mail in for their prescriptions. I think a lot of that is they use COVID for an excuse, but I guess we all know they'll never open back up again.
And then when, so I was watching Tucker Carlson, Melissa, I don't know if you want to check your email real quick, see if Scott got back to you, or maybe you could fire off a reminder. So I was watching Tucker Carlson last night. And Jay, I don't know if you heard this. I texted this to a few of my friends, but they were talking about how the Biden administration is looking at using climate change as a new emergency order to use the COVID quarantine example, only instead of a new virus, it's going to be climate change is going to be what will bring out the new emergency order to require more quarantines and shutdowns and lockdowns and on and on and on.
I don't know if they use it for lockdowns, but they sure as heck are going to use it for all kinds of whatever they can't get passed with votes. I mean, that kind of seems like standard operating procedure for government now. whatever we wanted before. Well, boy, we can get it now because we don't have to ask anybody. I guess, you think this is just a big, giant practice to see how much we'll take?
Hey, I've said it for a long time. It's political. It's been political, and I believe we're going to have to switch gears. We'll pick this conversation back up, Jay. And Jay, if you want to hang on, I'd like to talk a little bit more about Minnesota and some of these other ideas with Biden. But I believe we have got Senator Scott Jensen with us this evening. How are you doing, Scott? Hello? Maybe it's not Scott. I've got caller area code 507. Hello? Is this Larvita? I'll give you one more time. Caller area code 507. Welcome to the Bella D'Angelo Show.
I did text Senator Jensen to let him know that he can call in anytime, but I think he'll be calling from a 612 number.
Got it. Okay. Anyway, so I just, I'm still on the fence, as I traveled around today trying to get a handle on, is there a path for Trump? Because just listening to the insanity of Biden, I mean, guys, I just can't picture seeing that pinhead on TV that we actually have to look at him, let alone listen to him. And I was thinking about this earlier. I don't know why any of us didn't raise flags earlier about our questioning about just what the Dems were up to when they stole the nomination from Bernie. They give it to that pinhead Biden, and then Kamala, who, didn't even have 2% support when she was running. And then just the bizarreness, right? Did anybody notice how frail and inept Biden was during the campaigning leading up to the election? He said more stupid blunders than I'd ever heard. And it just, now when I look back, it just reeked of the theft and the thievery blindly in our eyes, and I don't know why we didn't question it a little bit more. Like, this just seems a little bit too bizarre that I feel like we should have known that they had this bag for the type of thievery, Chicago-style thievery that was coming our way. What do you think, Jay?
I think, well, I've been thinking just like you for a long time. That's pretty darn obvious. Why do you pick the corrupt guy with the, he obviously isn't going to be in charge. Everyone said that for a long time. Well, you pick him because everybody's in on it. Bernie never had a chance. Who's been collecting the bribes for the last 8, 5, 6, forever years? You got to get somebody who's in the club if you want to keep the grift going, and I guess Joe was the guy.
Well, I was just kind of kicking myself.
I think it's that simple. I think it's that simple. Donald Trump interrupted their card party. The circular back scrubbing party of everybody double dealing and paying each other off was kind of interrupted by 4 years of Mr. Donald Trump and the tweet machine. And, they got to get back in the saddle. Bernie's just not part of the club. Either that or he's just not a big enough player in the club. I thought it was pretty obvious that he was playing to lose.
Well, and I don't think that they realize that, if Trump is gone in January and if he runs again, they're not done with him. I think they also realize that for more of Donald J. Trump, we would never look or take a Democrat. Well, not that we would anyways, but who's going to take the Democrats serious? And the thing is I was so sure that Trump was getting in, and I just, I refuse to listen to the level of fraud because I did not think that they would go to the levels that they did. However, when we've talked about the establishment and poking the bear, I just don't even think I still don't think that we've even got to the tip of the iceberg of just how massively big this establishment is, including, you know, the Supreme Court justices that he put in, you know, Barr, Durham, all of them. I have been railing against all of them, saying, you know, don't expect anything to come forward, any investigations, anything. The Durham report, I don't hold water to any of that bullshit. And Christopher Wray has got to go from the FBI, but you know what? If none of this is taken care of, if Trump doesn't get in, like I was talking with Larvita earlier, I try not to go down there because I still do hold some hope, but I don't know what hope is going to be left if Biden and all these bad actors get back in, Jay.
Well, let's just hope that this whole scenario has at least wounded him enough that the poor guy really just does, you know, that's what killed me the most about Trump is everybody said corrupt this and corrupt that. Boy, that guy had so much sunshine on him. I mean, he couldn't put his hand in his pocket without everybody making a second mention of it. So I don't know how Donald Trump would have ever gotten the opportunity to do anything corrupt since he was under a microscope. Let's hope through this scenario that if, God forbid, Joe Biden does become president, the next 2 years leading up to the House of Representatives going back to the Republicans to stop just about anything he thinks of, will be Joe Biden under the microscope. I'm kind of looking forward to a Donald Trump tweeting from the golf course, the little marionette Joe Biden as a puppet of China, you know, to run around Twitter and Facebook. I've got to imagine that he's not going to get a moment of rest. The dynamics in politics has changed. No matter how much the media wants to cover for him, you know.
I'm going to give this caller one.
I think.
Hold on 1 second. 507, welcome to the Bella D'Angelo Show. Are you there? All right, someone's just randomly calling in to listen. That's great. Thanks for the support. Well, let me ask you this. We're still waiting on Scott Jensen, and if he can make it, maybe something came up. I know that I'm excited to have him on because when you listen to the video that he put out about the investigation, and you guys, Melissa or Jay, if you have to add into this, looking at how COVID cases, how the deaths were being counted, and that no underlying conditions were being taken into consideration. Just all deaths are to be marked COVID. Basically, is the result.
The gunshot to the head. That was my personal favorite.
Really, mine was being ejected from a car, and COVID was the reason they died.
Yeah, Mary found some good ones. I like the guy who was murdered, but I guess maybe it's a tie with the guy who was ejected from the car and they wrote down he died of COVID. That's, you know, it's a close one. It's a close one.
You know, guys, I wasn't that far off base. In March, I had just started working. I work for a company called First Aid, so I sell hand sanitizers and paper towels, hot paper, brake clean, all this industrial stuff. But anyways, somebody's phone is really noisy. Be careful what you're doing. If you're running over your phone, stop running it over. So my third day into the job, and I was listening to Rush, and he was talking about that, you know, where were you when H1N1 blew through? And that's when I all of a sudden said to myself, this is political. I mean, we always have some virus, going through during an election, and I didn't even remember being concerned about H1N1. That was in 2009, 2010 when I was moving out to the oil field. And that's when I asked myself that, we've gone from nonstop attacks on Donald J. Trump. And when the impeachment, I remember finally watching movies at night. Now, I'm a Fox addict. Now I'm Newsmax. I don't have OAN on my TV, but literally the impeachment was getting to the point where it was just absolute insanity. It was just Trump bashing towards the very end. And then almost overnight, it was overnight, all of a sudden it went from impeach to COVID. And I still, when you look around, I'm trying to understand, because I don't think that this manipulation of our society is ending anytime soon. How in the hell is McDonald's nationwide going to replace all of their stickers and their signage? I mean, that crap's everywhere, you guys. I believe, and that's why when it first rolled out, and when the Putz Walt, I think it's you, Jay, either that or Melissa, somebody's moving around. When he asked, we were asked to shut our businesses down. It was not a law that came out. We were asked, and all too quickly, we shut our doors, we shut our minds, and we didn't do some common sense thinking about a virus. When in the hell do you shut everything down for a virus?
I think it was just also like new in March, and they were talking about how deadly this was, and we were seeing and hearing stories come out of Italy, where people were left in their apartments for days and all this. And I think just out of the abundance of caution.
We didn't shut down for Ebola. I remember where I was.
I realized that. I'm just saying, I think, people were like just so, and it was like, what? And I mean, like for me, I'm in retail. So we weren't actually required to shut down when we did. I was actually not required to shut down until like closer to the end of March. But most of my friends in retail, we all shut down along with the salons and the restaurants on the 18th.
I'm just going to throw this out there. I think that we have become too thin-skinned, too easily plowed over by something that we weren't thinking about the long-term effects. I believe I have Scott Jensen in queue, and I'm going to bring him on because my fear was watching it. I'm not a business owner. My fear was if we do this and we show them how easy it is for us to shut our doors, stay in our houses, keep only 4 family members. For me, I battled being able to see my mom. It's not going to be the end. And if we don't fight to take our freedoms back, it's they've figured it out. And I want to bring on, I believe it is, Senator Scott Jensen.
Well, thank you for having me. It's good to be on.
Thank you, sir. We've been talking COVID, and, as you kind of heard, I was really shocked in March, the quickness of our community here in Minnesota to just shut our doors and be compliant. I am a very non-compliant, very questioning, inquisitive individual that believed that this was highly politically charged when it came out, and I was very interested to watch your video and your investigation of the COVID numbers. So I will kind of let you take it from here in debunking these wrongly classified COVID deaths that has literally scared the crap out of Minnesota and the rest of the U.S. And dispelling and taking common sense away from people is what I believe the virus has also done. Go ahead, Scott.
I think you're right. And I think one of the really insidious things that happened was we were recruited as a citizenry to participate for the greater good by joining the adventure of flattening the curve so that we could allow our healthcare facilities to prepare themselves so they wouldn't be overwhelmed. But somewhere there was a pivot. And in that pivot, we were all of a sudden being recruited to squash COVID-19, which none of us had never bought into. We had never been told by Mike Osterholm or Dr. Fauci or anybody else that you could squash this virus. And yet all of a sudden that became the thing. At the same time, on a parallel track, we were seeing some of these organizations that we'd grown to trust, like the Department of Health and the CDC and the World Health Organization, give mixed messages. And then we were told that, oh, and by the way, the focus on precision in diagnosis and the need for specificity and a sequence of causation in regards to the completion of a death certificate. These things aren't so important if COVID-19 is involved. If it's emphysema or asthma, to be sure, do it the way we've always done it. But if it's COVID-19 that wasn't really causing the death, but was there, or you thought it might be there, or you thought it was probable, or it was a contributing condition, and normally you would put it in Part 2 on a death certificate. Don't do it now. Put it as a cause of death. But, oh, by the way, if it's emphysema or asthma and it's a contributing condition, continue to put it into that little box Part 2, where we've done it for the last 17 years. This kind of massaging of the techniques and the procedures that we follow was incredibly damaging to the public trust. And so when I read this communication from the Department of Health and then went to the CDC's document in terms of what they were asking us to do, I was stunned. I thought, well, what in the world? I mean, we've never done this. We didn't do this for the 2009 swine flu. We didn't do it for 2002 with the SARS-CoV-1 virus. And this is really, the predicament we're in was not created by John Q. Citizen not being compliant and doing all that they could. This was created by the bureaucrats and the politicians and some physicians and some epidemiologists that, frankly, I think that some of these they're gonna gag on the microphone. They swallow the thing so damn much. That I really think that when we talk about the trust being fractured, this is not on John Q. Citizen. This is on the politicians and the leaders and the bureaucrats.
Now, Scott, let me ask you, when I say it was politicized, I really believe, so I hear, pharmacists are saying that they're not dispensing Tamiflu right now, and there's really no flu cases. So, we rename influenza COVID, and then I believe that it was politicized, and also it was marketed this asymptomatic, which I think is also another fear tactic, because I have never heard of having the most deadly virus, supposedly deadly virus, that you don't even have one damn symptom. I mean, who calls up your doctor and says, I'm sure that I'm days away from just falling into my grave from this horrific virus that is taking out half the world, and I really want to come in and get tested? And they say, well, what symptoms do you have? Well, I don't have a one. I mean, so then it's all bundled into this marketing plan where you can't even drive down 494 without seeing Merry Christmas, mask up, make Santa happy. I mean, it's everywhere. And then I believe that it was bundled up so that it feared most of the country, and then created the mail-in ballot, which the ultimate plan was interceding in the re-election of Trump.
Well, that's a lot to unpack on that one. I mean, you said a lot. No, it's okay. But so let's go back to the issue of transmission and asymptomatic transmission.
Yeah.
So if we have a true asymptomatic person, then we really don't have any large particles being coughed out or sneezed out because they're asymptomatic. Well, if they don't have any large particles, 5 microns or so, then what is the mask doing? Because the mask can help with the larger particles. But virtually every study has conceded that if you're talking about small particle aerosol transmission in the realm of 0.1 to 0.3 microns, which arguably an N95 mask might have some impact on, but certainly cotton masks and surgical masks were never intended to go anywhere in that realm. I mean, we're talking about a magnitude off. We're talking 50 difference times 50 difference. I mean, 0.1 micron times 50 gets you 5 microns, which is what the pore size is in these cotton and surgical masks. So I think when we look at asymptomatic transmission, it feels like we're being played. It feels like it's just, well, even in what's happening with the United Kingdom today. So they have a lot more cases in certain areas. They've got a new strain that's got a dozen mutations on it. And so they're saying, oh my, now we've got a strain that's 70 times contagious. Well, the leading epidemiologists in the United Kingdom are already coming out of Oxford saying, this is absolutely ludicrous. You don't just these numbers out of thin air and conflate them into some new level of fear-mongering. And that's what's happening. So, yeah, the good thing out of this whole thing is that there's an awful lot of citizens, everyday citizens, that are just not buying what they're being sold. And they're saying, nope, we're not doing this. We are not going to buy this. And we're going to continue to engage, and we're going to continue to protest. And I really think that that's going to be the saving grace for us as a nation and as a world, is that we are not going to go quietly into the night.
Dr. Jensen, my name is Jay. I became friends with Bella because we're both fellow cynics. Neither one of us trusts the DFL as far as you can throw them, and haven't for a long time. Listening to you give your description, I was wondering, in retrospect, at what point in time did COVID within Minnesota not become an emergency that the legislature and the health department could handle through compromise, cooperation, and regular channels? And at what time do you think that the DFL realized that continuing the emergency would give them additional powers to do other things that probably you wouldn't have let them do as a legislature?
That is an outstanding question. And if Governor Walz had for one moment paused and just asked the Republican Senate that question, when is it that you thought that we were done, that we could work together? When do you think I should have given up my emergency powers? That would have been a bridge upon which we could have built true cooperation, and we would have Minnesota buy-in on a much broader scale. But he's never asked the question you just asked. I would say that now, when we put things up in May without a bonding bill, and we've done some things to support the COVID. We'd already gone through a lockdown. We'd gone through an extension. Things had settled down. We were seeing the seasonality. I think the first special session in June, if you would have said, okay, 30 more days, and then it's over, we're going to work together as a team. We'll have the majority leader in the House and the Senate, and the minority leader in the House and the Senate work with me, and the five of us will do it, because they were already doing that in terms of determining which bills would be addressed. I think that's when we should have done it. I think once we got into June and July, we were no longer having moment-by-moment decision-making. We were now having reasonable cogitation. We knew already that the models had been flawed. Even by June, we knew that Governor Walz's comment that we were going to have 74,000 deaths, and then he reduced it to 29,000. And then the infamous statement that in the middle of July, we're going to have almost 1,000 deaths every day. Those already had been debunked. So at that point in time...
Well, now knowing that the DFL is maybe still has some health concerns, but exploiting the extra political opportunity that's available, is there any reason for the cynics like myself and Bella to believe that anytime in the near future the governor won't extend this out as long as possible for political benefit, as long as there's any reasonable medical explanation or COVID fear narrative in the news?
No,
Senator
there's
Jackson,
no reason.
can I just ask a question? Go ahead.
Well, to that question, I would just say that there's no reason to think that the governor is going to relinquish his emergency powers. And it's very likely that he will hold that over the head of the legislator, he will hold that like a billy club. And he may well try to hold on to emergency powers until the World Health Organization announces the end of the pandemic, which could well be in the latter part of the summer.
Wow.
Holy crap. Melissa, what's your question?
So that, Dr. Jensen, first of all, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight, for taking time out of your busy schedule to come on with us. I appreciate that so much. But my question is, is this, I continue, Ellison was on a podcast or a show the other day, and he said, we need to quarantine till the vaccine. And then I listened to Walz talk the other day, and he made a comment about the next 6 months are going to show us who we really are. And then even today, when he was interviewed by Carol Levin, I believe it was yesterday, maybe even, or last night, he basically said he still isn't even willing to consider loosening up the restrictions on bars and restaurants in January, even though our numbers have dropped exponentially. And if you look at the states around us, they're in the same exact number range we are without the same restrictions. And Wisconsin has a very similar demographic. I mean, almost same amount of people. So, Mike, is this is this really about, is it the vaccine? Is that the end game here for Walz too? Like, is that big pharma? Is that the big money donors? What is that?
I think this is about control. I think it's about control and power. The fact that we've got so many border communities in Minnesota, we've got a large border. And you look at North and South Dakota, Iowa, and Wisconsin, and you look what's happening, and you look at the dramatic drop that we've had in the positivity rate and the cases, and you look at the ICUs and the hospital beds, we are not in a critical situation. Governor Walz is enjoying being a 4-star general for the first time in his life. He is. He's enjoying it. He's enjoying it too much.
Yeah, you know why? You know when he was in school? He was the ugly little fat kid that nobody talked to. And God forbid, I bet you he didn't have a date until he somehow paid for one. I mean, that's the danger.
I'm not going to go there.
Sorry, I go there. But, I mean, that's the danger of when these people get control that they are not used to. And I'm sorry for the dinging on my computer. I need to turn the volume down. But, I mean, the danger, though, and Scott, I went through, my mom is 83 years old. She lives in an apartment complex, but the only requirement is 55 years and older. And the director of that apartment complex, who probably has a short man syndrome, very much like lovely Walt, he made his own mandate where I have to schedule an appointment to actually see my mom. And then I had to get a doctor's note because I do her blood pressure and her meds to be able to see her without this harassment. The harassment still didn't stop. And then they tried to tell me they even had the right to deny me access to my mom even on Christmas and Christmas Eve. And all of this is illegal, but I have to involve an attorney. But that's the dangerous part about this whole thing that has happened is that so many people that should never have control or invasive things in your life have, and it's happening all over the state. But you're right about the people saying and not buying into it. But I'm just wondering, when are more people, because where I live in Maple Grove, and I'm still seeing 98, 99% people wearing these little stupid cloth masks.
Well, let's just unpack that a little bit. I was doing a radio program earlier today with some United Kingdom radio stations, and in the United Kingdom, the initial protests and demonstrations came from the political right, but it quickly filled in from the political left. We're seeing that taking place more slowly in Minnesota and the United States. I think that there was a lot of, if you will, more conservatives that were saying, this just doesn't max right. The Constitution is being absolutely thrown to the wind. But we're seeing more and more people that are independent and somewhat liberal-minded saying, well, we don't understand why the schools are being closed down. We don't understand why a liberal organization like the American Academy of Pediatrics comes out and says, get the kids back in school, and it's not happening. We don't understand why the governor insists on one size fits all, let's do a cookie cutter approach. So when you start to look at that, we're starting to see a little bit of movement where what we need to have happen is this engagement has to be bipartisan. This has got to be where people are saying, this doesn't make sense. This just doesn't make sense. In Minnesota, we have a greater than 95% mask compliance rate, and yet with the mask mandate on July 25th, we did not see a reduction. We saw a slow exponential climb. So regardless of what we want, I don't want to die on the hill regarding masks, but what we're seeing is absolutely confounding. And I think that Minnesotans are starting to say, well, putting politics aside doesn't make sense.
No, it's I've designed shirts that say "Do not comply" on the front, and then on the back, "America built on defiance" with the fists with the red, white, and blue. I myself never, I put the mask on just to enter my mom's apartment complex, but I believe in herd immunity. I believe that, when, like you said, we're never going to squash a virus. That isn't how it works. And one thing that I have observed is many people that have stayed locked up and stayed masked up and gloved up and sanitized their world and their groceries and everything, the minute that they get a little bit out of their zone, those are the people that are getting COVID because they have no immunity built up.
Yeah, and you make a good point. You said you believe in herd immunity, and I would just want to say this. I've heard people say that, and I remind them herd immunity isn't a religion. I mean, in the same way that Newton noticed that the apple always falls down, and we discovered gravity. Herd immunity is the same way. We had herd immunity taking place before we ever had any kind of a vaccine for measles. And in 1933, we started to identify that herd immunity occurred in communities where they would have a fair amount of measles take place, and all of a sudden, the incidence of measles would drop off. And I think that was really when human discussions regarding herd immunity took place. In 1910, we had the veterinarians talking about herd immunity in regards to some of the cattle herds. So I think herd immunity it's not something you believe in or not. It's an absolute thing. It's as much of a thing as gravity is. And so herd immunity is absolutely taking place. Every day we get more and more positive cases. And we don't even have a very good ability to measure the number of people that have cellular immunity, which isn't able to be identified by the serology antibody testing that we're doing. And then there's another group of people that probably have an immune resistance just intrinsically, an innate immunity. We're not measuring that as well. So we are moving toward where we need to be with this. And people need to understand that.
Well, there's got to be a light at the end of the tunnel because it breaks my heart when my mom, who, she is a Democrat and she watches nothing but mainstream media. But if you want to know the impact of mainstream media on the elderly, just call my mom up. She's back to being frozen. She doesn't want to leave on Christmas, just like she didn't want to leave on Thanksgiving because of the shaming and the fearing. But she'll come over on Saturday. I did make it. I was able to go in and see her because, this complex that she's living in, they're not allowing any family members on Christmas or Christmas Eve into a 55-year and older apartment. And the bigger impact on our kids and the elderly and those with addictions, I mean, it's just got to stop. And Scott, I want to thank you so much for coming on tonight. Thank you for your research. Let me ask you this. If the true numbers of actual COVID deaths, where would you say the actual true numbers of COVID deaths do you have a good estimate of either in the country or like in Minnesota?
Well, I looked over out of the first 2,800 deaths in Minnesota, I looked over those probably 30 or 40 data points on each one of those. So that was, hundreds of thousands of data points. And based on that, I think that the 2,800 should have been 2,000. I think there should have been 2,000 deaths identified as COVID-19 because that would be the underlying cause of death. And I think the fact that there was another 800 on top of that, 800 over 2,000 is 40%. So I think there's a 40% inflation rate there. I also think that some of those cases where the underlying cause of death was identified as COVID are debatable because I think that there were several cases where they identified COVID-19 as the underlying cause of death. But the fact of the matter is there had been a different significant medical problem that had initiated the sequence of events that led to a death. If you have someone have a stroke that is profound and they lose half their body, they're not able to feed themselves as well, they start to, if you will, they're slowly checking out. If that person ends up developing slow renal failure, their immune system is suppressed, and then they end up developing a bronchial infection, and then they're diagnosed with COVID-19 and they die. The COVID-19 could certainly be put in as the immediate cause of death, but the all-important underlying cause of death would have been the stroke. And if we're seeing doctors put COVID-19 as that underlying cause of death in that situation, we're inflating the numbers. And that's what the CDC has said for 17 years. Identify the initiating event that led to the sequence of events that brought about the demise. I think that we need an audit. We need an audit statewide. We need an audit nationwide, because at the end of the day, we are seeing people clamoring for more dollars based on their statistics. And if their statistics have been massaged, if they have decided, well, we're going to go ahead and casually and liberally diagnose COVID-19, then you're going to have some states get less dollar support than they should, and you're going to see some states get more dollar support than they should. So my final comment would be, we need to audit this, because quite frankly, something doesn't smell right.
Just like the election results, and I got to ask you my final closing question. Are you going to contest the electors?
I don't have any impact on that. I don't. We're done with the session. I'm done in 10 days. So I don't. Okay. I've already made it clear that I think one of the critical problems we have in our country, and certainly in Minnesota, is election integrity is gone, and we need to stop this. What we've seen happen in the last 3 election cycles, 16, 18, and 20, should cause everybody to be frightened. We have put such an emphasis on maximizing the number of ballots in the box, when what we should be doing is we put an emphasis on making sure that every ballot in the box represents an eligible voter. And in order to get that, I don't know why we wouldn't have some form of voter ID to make sure that when people vote, they're entitled to vote, because I don't want my vote to be canceled out by someone who doesn't have the right to vote.
Amen. I've been screeching about this, so I got to ask one more question. I know that I said that was my closing, but I ask everybody this because I've heard so many different opinions from listening to talk radio. Do you still think there is a path for Donald Trump to be in for 4 more?
Well, I'm a faith-based person, and I believe in miracles, so I have to say yes.
I love you. I love it.
Dr. Jensen, thank you so much.
Yes, you've been a wonderful guest. I hope you come on the show again. Thank you for your time and all of your information.
Thank you. Please have me back sometime soon.
I sure will. Thank you.
All right. Good night.
Good night. God bless.
Hey, everybody. Christian's back here. That was just a quick little example of the good content we're going to provide for you here at Bella the Patriot. We're going to have some new, interesting personalities on the show. I'm going to tease you a little bit with what we've got coming on here, because I think it's going to be spectacular. There's a bunch of other changes I'm working on too, because I'm sick and tired of fighting with Blog Talk. We're probably going to change somewhere else. There is one thing I need for anybody who still happens to be listening. If you're listening here, I need you to leave me a note somewhere, whether it's on the YouTube page, whether it's on Bella's page, could even be on Blog Talk if you can make it work. Let us know, 1, where you're from, and 2, how often you really would like to call into the show. We do get a few callers, but it's not that many. And I'm wondering if it would be worth the increase in quality to go from a live show to a pre-recorded show. You still would be able to call in if you knew what to do or paying attention. You can still probably get that done. But I can put together a much better show that way. So let me know. Find a place where you can comment and let Bella know what you think we should do. Alrighty, folks. It's been fun. What is Bella? How does she end the show? I forget now. I gotta go. Oh, what is it? Oh man, I forget now how it ends. Anyway, I'm not gonna steal her tagline. I guess I should probably come up with my own. But I just want you all to know I appreciate the time we spent together and helping out here. Really, it's super easy. Barely an inconvenience. Well, now I got it working. Haha.
Nobody knew who the hell he was. Or have lived in a Muslim-majority country. I know because I am one of them.
How's that hokey-cheesy stuff working out for you?
He's now our president. He's our president.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.
Taking back America, one listener at a time. This is the Bella D'Angelo Show.
Well, now I got it working. Haha.
Nobody knew who the hell he was. Or have lived in a Muslim-majority country. I know because I am one of them.
How's that hokey-cheesy stuff working out for you?
He's now our president. He's our president.
If we lose freedom here, there's no